To talk us through the steps towards accessible ebook production flow, please welcome Luc Audrin. Bienvenue.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
It's really a great opportunity to explain you what we did at Hachette. Let's start the presentation.
Is it working?
1 minute, I'm just trying to share my screen, so I hope it will work.
No worries. There we are.
Here we are. I hope it's okay, but it's not in full screen. Hope it's okay now.
No.
Coming soon. Here it is. Yes, Hachette Livre is a very big publisher. It's almost 60 different imprints in France, more than 16,000 new books per year. And I would speak mainly about simple books, the books we publish every year as textbooks. We call them as novels and all these kind of books. So first of all, as to explain, like Christina, we are not in a position to invent new technologies or new standards. Technologies and standards are here. There were technologies for accessibility were built at the W3C. W3C is working on web accessibility for years. The web accessibility initiative started in the last century. And also, ebook formats have been different kind and sometimes are still proprietary. But now we have with EPUB an open ebook format that is maintained by the whole international community. It's in W3C now. It's based on the latest web technologies, so it includes accessibility from the web, and also the tools built for the community that are free, like EPUB Check, is up to date now and since last year to the latest specifications. So we have an EPUB ecosystem that is stable and the best we ever had. We also have a very precise accessibility standards, very precise techniques that explains how accessibility can be coded inside EPUB. It's also published. It was published at the beginning of 2017. It's also worked at ISO. It is called EPUB Accessibility 1.0. And to check these accessibility features, at least at the technical point, the DAISY Consortium has built an accessibility checker for EPUB. It's a free tool. It's available and it checks how the coding of the accessibility is done inside an EPUB. So it allows people to be at the best technical coding inside EPUB. Obviously, it cannot check if an image is well described, but this is something that has to be done afterwards or besides, but at least about the technologies that are driving the assistive tools for the blind or visually impaired people, we have good tools to check. And by the end, last point is about the knowledge of the full production ecosystem. It's not only a publisher issue, it's also an ecosystem issue because people like Hachette, we did use supplier for the production of content in EPUB. And these suppliers are increasingly aware of accessibility techniques, and they are increasingly aware of how to produce born accessible ebooks. Also, we are often speaking about InDesign. InDesign is a great tool for complex layout. It exports in EPUB and EPUB 3.2, but it's not perfect as we speak of accessibility. So with Foundation Lia and we spoke to InDesign, and we hope the InDesign people will improve this export because it works, but it's still a lot of work. So let's speak about Hachette feedback. It's 20 years production, because we started in 2001. So I will explain what we did in Hachette in 5 dates. First of all, at the beginning of 2000th century, the southern decade, we had set up a production process that was XML driven, an XML production process for simple layout books. Obviously, it may be mainly novels and essays. I think it's books that are not highly structured, like dictionaries, or not high with complex layouts like school books or books, table books, but they are text-driven, meaning the text is flowing from page to pages. It has some structure, obviously. And this, for our group, is several thousand titles per year. The production of book composition at Hachette has been subcontracted to external suppliers. So we rely on the technicity and the tools of the suppliers. It's an ecosystem, production ecosystem. And at the very beginning of this process, we had 2 mandatory deliveries, a print PDF, of course, which was sent to the printer, but also the content of the book, which has to be structured in XML. We had our own French variant of Dogbook, which I was maintaining during all these years. And finally, what was the success of this process is also that the payment of order at the supplier level was conditioned with checks. If the PDF was not complete or the XML was not valid, the supplier was not paid. So it made us a success here, because suppliers did the right thing to increase their knowledge and skills, to obviously allow us to have good printed books, but also knowledge about structure and XML. So this lasted several years, and at the end of this decade, we started to produce also ebooks. We added ebooks as a mandatory delivery to our suppliers. Obviously, in 2009, we started with EPUB 2, but that was available at that moment. But also, we had the systematic check of conformance to EPUB standard. That is EPUB check. EPUB check is a tool that says this EPUB is an EPUB. It is conforming to the specific techniques and structure of an EPUB file, meaning that if someone builds a reading system based on this standard, it should work. But we also, at the very beginning, we started to add some information inside the digital format, inside the ebook. We kept the page marks that were in the print book, because it was something we think interesting at the very beginning, because of use of ebooks inside classrooms. For instance, when the teacher says, next week, we will study page 20 or page 50, where is it in the ebook? So we said that we had to keep the pages marked inside the EPUB. Then, as you know, in 2011, EPUB 3 specs were published. We had several years before switching to EPUB 3 in Hachette, but we did start this progressive switch to EPUB 3 in 2016. We asked all our downstream, because we asked first to our downstream distributors if they were okay with version 3. They were not all at the beginning, and we had to wait until end of 2015, because before all distributors were okay with EPUB 3. So in 2016, we started a new EPUB 3 RFP, and we asked our suppliers to switch to this new version of the standard. We gave them 2 years to do this switch. But in that RFP, I did include accessibility premises, not the full accessibility, but something that was at that moment in 2016, 16 thought as accessibility technique. It was the mandatory EPUB type attribute. EPUB type is only an information that says inside the HTML of the EPUB, the book structure, also where are the footnotes. And then in 2017, EPUB accessibility specs were published by IDPF and then afterward by W3C. So we had a spec that said what exactly is accessibility in EPUB. So we studied these specs, we looked at the ecosystem, and in 2018, we decided to switch fully accessible, meaning that we wanted that the accessibility techniques that are explained in these specifications were respected by our suppliers. So we had the chance to find that the DAISY consortium was developing an accessibility checker for EPUB. So we did use this accessibility checker in our production process. We use ACE, and in this production process, we did not accept any violation in the ACE report. It had to be perfect on the technical side of the verification done by ACE. So we benefited from the EPUB attributes, EPUB type attributes we did add in 2016 to add the role attribute, which is mandatory for the structure of the EPUB. We had this RFP sent to our suppliers, and they were very proactive, I must admit. They were very happy to contribute to this improvement of EPUB delivery. But they had questions. So I spent some time to explain, to train somehow the suppliers. And at the same moment, in 2018, we decided to close any EPUB 2 reception. We did not accept anymore for the publishers of the group that EPUB were produced in EPUB 2 version. And this was done in 2018. The message here is to build an accessibility production, stop to produce EPUB 2. EPUB 3 does it better. And then last date, it was only at the beginning of this year that in 2020, we sent accessibility metadata to all platforms, because since 2018, we were sending EPUB 3 for simple books with accessibility inside, but also we have to inform platforms that these EPUB 3 are available as born accessible. We did that only for novels because we are cautious. We did that only for novels because cover image is simply described. We have still issues in Hachette about describing all the images. It's not perfect. So it's still in progress. This is work in progress. These are the main steps we did follow, but we are also contributing to improve the production with something more human, image description. That's for next year. And it has to be done before 2025. Finally, I would like to leave you some lessons from this feedback. How did we do? And if we go a bit higher, what does it mean? As Christina said, we should first go to digital. Obviously, non-digital, like for instance, even PDF, but when the PDFs are only image capture of pages, it's not accessible at all. And if you know that the visually impaired people are not very satisfied with accessibility in PDF. So stop EPUB 2 for producing accessible ebooks, stop PDF. And also in EPUB 3, there are two variants. There is a reflowable version and the fixed layout. The fixed layout is more complex and very difficult to put accessibility inside. So with EPUB 3 reflowable, you are in the perfect conditions to start with. There are many actors working in this area and this ecosystem. The main one is for accessibility is DAISY Consortium. DAISY Consortium is contributing to web accessibility worldwide. DAISY Consortium is building tools. They are developing EPUB Check. They are developing ACE. So you may also benefit from this actor, DAISY Consortium. You may be a member of DAISY Consortium. I am a member of DAISY Consortium. And they are producing and contributing to the knowledge of accessibility. EDR Lab also is a very important structure. It's a European structure. It's based in Paris, but it also contributes to the international ecosystem because EDR Lab is contributing to standards, is also a developer, is developing a Radium solution, which is the best reading system you can build applications on. And also it's accessibility aware, and it does a lot for accessibility. We have also the Accessible Book Consortium in Geneva, in WIPO, who does also a lot of things like white papers and trainings and so on. And you have also W3C Publishing Community Group and EPUB Working Group. Now you have to know that EPUB is inside W3C. W3C Publishing and W3C is taking care of EPUB and ebooks and accessibility. That's a great news because these standards are developed internationally, are available for free. You can use, obviously, the tools of the community that are free, EPUB Check from DAISY Consortium and W3C. You have to know that EPUB Check is not absolutely free. It's free to use, but it needs some money to be developed and maintained. I've put in my slide the link to contribute to this international fundraising. We still lack $10,000 to finish the plan we started 2 years ago to make EPUB Check the best tool and to the highest level tool to be maintained by the community for accessibility. Because never forget that an accessible EPUB needs to be first a valid EPUB. There is no accessibility if that EPUB doesn't get through EPUB Check without error. And there is also this ACE tool from DAISY Consortium, very interesting, very accurate on techniques. And also you have for people building applications about accessibility techniques, there is this Radium SDK built by EDR Lab, which is now available as a simple application for PCs and Macs, which is called Thorium. And Thorium, with this Radium SDK engine inside, has been said by George Kershaw, one of the leaders of the DAISY Consortium, as the best tool for accessibility he ever used. And he says he reads only in Thorium now. But most important of all, not only techniques, but organizational steps are very important for publishers. As we already said with Christina, you may start with a progressive approach that we did in Hachette, starting with simple books, and also not do things alone internally, but work with the experts, but also with the suppliers. Suppliers are well acquainted with techniques and development. What was interesting inside Hachette is that we decoupled specification from purchase order. I was the specifier. I did all the RFPs and I make it step by step during the years so that the suppliers were not starting from scratch, from 0 to 100%. They did it progressively. So we had a progressive enhancements path that I was specifying, but I was not the buyer. The centralized production department was the buyer. That's different. It was very productive for us in Hachette as a publisher. Main thing to do is to raise awareness, not only training, but also awareness. It means, like Christina said, and we did that in France. I have some photo in this slide. You may not see if you are blind, but we asked our friend from the blind people in France, Fernando Pinto da Silva, to help us to understand what it is to read an ebook when we are blind. And Fernando did a lot of demonstrations in the French Publisher Association, but also in Hachette. We asked him to explain what it is to read a book when you are visually impaired. And this is very, very interesting because publishers are seeing for the first time that it can be done, that there is a possibility to do that, and that it needs some techniques and it needs some work inside the publishing teams. We also work a lot with local blind association, and it's very interesting to have people from this ecosystem to work very closely with publishers. And internally, something is to be done, not technically, but on terms of organization. You need champions. You need people to lead this idea, to push this idea. And also, you may elaborate guidelines and charters. You may elaborate some very high-level executive guidelines. That means to ask people managing publishing teams that they are aware of this work and that it's not magic, but it's not something that cannot be done. It can be done very simply, but step by step. So these organizational steps are very important for us publishers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. That's super useful. I have questions and reflections from the chat. First, people are feeling feelings about InDesign and the baby steps it's taking forward, but they're cheering on the baby steps at least. So first, Marianne Gulsted from Denmark asks, so an accessible EPUB 3 is better than PDF for UA, correct? Could you just elaborate in some of the ways, and perhaps in particular, how does a reader without visual impairment still benefit from EPUB 3?
You know, first of all, between PDF and EPUB, reflowable EPUB, it's very different because PDF, the pages are fixed somehow. You cannot change the size of the characters and the size of the typesetting. You cannot change the fonts. I'm relying on what the visual impaired people do about PDF. They are experiencing some issues and they cannot read PDF. Even us as visual people, we cannot read PDFs on this kind of screen. Mm-hmm. So there is something that isn't quite adapted to all the tools that the readers are using. Mm. And we know that also for ebooks, more and more people are reading ebooks on smartphones. And technically, another issue with PDF is that I must admit that in the research and development, in the standards, PDF is not evolving anymore as an ebook format. It's perfect for print, but as an ebook format, there was some evolutions at the beginning of 2000, but beside that, the EPUB 3 ecosystem is evolving and is benefiting from the latest techniques and web technologies. EPUB 3 is based on the latest version of HTML, not HTML 5.0, the latest version of HTML. So in 5 years from now, EPUB 3 will be still at the latest version of HTML. It will be still up to date. So it will benefit from all the work that is done inside W3C for accessibility.
Here, there are some reflections. Jonas L. here says not producing PDFs would be a problem in academic publishing. The lack of good reading systems for Windows Desktop, that is the lack of good EPUB reading software for Windows Desktop is one of the problems. And Marius here says, no, sorry, that was a different thing. Yeah. So do you have a reflection on this thing, the survival of PDFs in academic publishing?
I understand that from academic libraries, it's much easier to push the PDFs from the publishers, but publishers that are producing EPUB as ebook formats, they do a lot for accessibility, and accessibility is also an issue for academic libraries. So this is an issue for everyone. And I have to say also that there is now, and for several months already, there is now the latest techniques reading system. It's called Thorium. It's free. And it has never been better to read EPUB on the desktop, Mac and PC. So Thorium is reading EPUB 3 born accessible. And it's difficult to say that there is no good reading systems. There are.
That's great. Kirsi Ylänne asks a question that you have partially already answered. She asks, did Ashed Liva do usability testing with end users, readers of ebooks, and on different kinds of devices, different screen sizes? If yes, what kinds of end users were involved? And now, of course, we've already heard that you collaborated with your local blind community.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
We know for sure because we did our own quality assurance tests. We do internally the quality assurance to read those EPUBs, not only on screens of computers, but also on tablets and smartphones. We know also that smartphones like the iOS Apple platform is known from the visually impaired people as the highest accessibility assistance technology. So we worked internally with the Blind Youth Association, but particularly inside a technical group we had, an expert group we had in the French Publisher Association, where we were working for 3 years with Fernando Pinto da Silva, for instance, meaning we had these visually impaired, these blind people were members of our group to understand and contribute for the publishing community that they understand the step they can do toward born accessible EPUBs.
That's great. Marianne Gulstad was also asking, what do you think about Adobe Liquid Look? That's Adobe's solution to read a PDF on a small screen. Have you tried that?
No.
Nope.
No.
Yeah, neither have I.
Still, I do refer to, for instance, the very recent white paper published by the DESI Consortium. They published a white paper and they compare techniques by techniques, PDF and EPUB. So there are very interesting lessons to read there.
There's also in the chat, I should just refer everyone to go take a look. There's really interesting conversation about EPUB in different browser environments and so on. I just want to ask you, still, about just the costs. How much do this transformation in the production environment cost?
I have to say that for Hachette, it was at no cost. That's the fact is that as we did step by step with our suppliers, we started in 2001 this XML-centric process, and we asked in 2009 to produce EPUBs from this XML. Oh, there was obviously a cost for this transformation that was not present before, but that was the cost to produce an EPUB 2 from an XML file. But then afterwards, switching to EPUB 3, we did it at no cost. Because for a supplier that already produces EPUB 2 files, switching to EPUB 3 is straightforward. And then adding accessibility using the accessibility techniques described in the accessibility specifications, we did it for Hachette at no cost because it was possible and very simple for a existing process inside a supplier to add this information.
Yeah, that is wonderful to hear.
Yeah, but obviously someone starting from nothing to go to 100% is very expensive. But if we do it progressively, if you do some pilot project like Christina said, there will be some investments, obviously, but we have to go.
That's fantastic. Look, thank you very much again for all this advice. I think also one major takeaway, of course, is to create this timeline for yourself as a publisher between now and 2025, sitting down with your in-house teams, your upstream and downstream collaborators, and making that together is also a really good idea. Thank you very much, Lek.